So we all know that your different sleep cycles and sleep stages are super important. But when it comes down to learning new memories and cementing those memories in your brain, where specifically in your sleep cycle is it most important? And how do we make sure we're getting enough of that? So researchers started looking at this in the early 2000s. So basically what they did is they had people look at a list of facts and they had them sleep for half of the night. They either had them sleep in the first half of the night or the second half of the night. Now, if you remember from what I said before, your first half of your night is dominated by your NREM sleep, and your second half of your night is dominated by REM sleep. Again, REM sleep is where most of your dreaming occurs, and your NREM sleep has those 4 different stages, where it goes from stage 1 to stage 4, with stage 1 being your lightest sleep, so it's basically easier for you to wake up. And stage 4 is your deepest sleep, so it's harder for you to wake up. And again, no matter what, if you sleep later than you normally do in the night, no matter what, you're going to be missing out on that NREM sleep. At the same time, if you wake up earlier than you normally do, no matter what, you're going to be cutting out on that REM sleep. Now, what these studies found is for these types of memories, for your factual-based information, the studies are pretty clear that your NREM sleep, specifically your deep NREM sleep, is the most important when it comes down to these types of memories. So the more deep NREM sleep a person got, the more their ability to remember things were the next day. So the people that were sleeping in the first half of the night did a lot better than the people sleeping in the second half of the night. So if you're trying to cram for a big final exam and you're wondering, should I sleep at midnight or should I sleep at 4 a.m.? Should I stay up those 4 hours throughout the night or should I just wake up really early and start studying before my exam? It's probably better to make sure you get those first 4 hours of sleep so that you can help cement a lot of those memories that you've already been studying the whole time. These studies that people were looking at were so accurate where they didn't even have to look at anything else. They just had to look at your brain activity. And all they had to see was how much deep NREM sleep were you getting. And they could use that number to basically see how much information you would remember the next day. That's how accurate this is. And researchers also looked at the MRI scans of people, and they wanted to see where this information was getting drawn from. So they looked at people's brains before they slept, and they saw where that information was coming from. And they also looked at the people's brains after they slept. What they found is, before people went to sleep, they would retrieve their information from their hippocampus. Now, if you remember, your hippocampus is basically your short-term storage center in your brain. So anytime you're awake and you're getting new information, it's going into your hippocampus. And after people went to sleep, again, they looked at the MRI scans and they found that it was coming from their neocortex. Now, your neocortex makes up about half of your brain, and this is basically the top part of your brain. And this is where your long-term storage of your information will occur. So after you're going to sleep, this information is traveling from your hippocampus to your neocortex. It's basically going from your short-term storage to your long-term, more stable storage. Now, the other cool part about this, again, is you are freeing up your hippocampus when you do this. So when you go to sleep, your information that's traveling away from your hippocampus frees up that short-term storage so that you can store new information. So again, if you're that high schooler that's trying to cram for an exam and you're cramming all night, you go to sleep at midnight and you get those 4 hours of sleep, at least you're getting that deep NREM sleep where you can cement all those memories you've learned so far. And also you're clearing out your hippocampus where you can learn new information if you have to start studying at 4 a.m. again. Now, ideally, you would study in advance and not have to cram so much last minute, but at least you can use this to help you out a little bit. Now, this cycle of information going from your hippocampus to your neocortex happens every single night. Every single night, your memory architecture in your brain is changing ever so slightly when you're sleeping. Now, even daytime naps have been shown to improve your memory, as long as they have enough of your NREM sleep. So you don't need a full 90-minute sleep cycle. Even a 20-minute nap can improve your memory. Now, what about things that aren't facts? So there's other types of memories too, like motor skills, or for example, people learning an instrument, or riding a bike, or playing a sport, etc. So sleep can help a lot with those as well. Those are what's called your muscle memories. Now, obviously, your memories aren't stored in your muscles. Your memories are still in your brain. So there was a study kind of showing this. So they took these people who were right-handed, and they had them learn a number sequence on a keyboard. So it was kind of similar to learning a piano. They had to learn this random number sequence, and they basically practiced it for a total of 12 minutes. And they wanted to see both how fast they could do the sequence and how accurately they could do the sequence. So half of the people, they learned this in the morning and they stayed awake, and then they practiced it later in the evening. And the other half learned it in the evening, then they went to sleep and they practiced it the next morning. And what they found is the group that stayed awake, they had no improvement in their performance. But the group that slept after learning, they actually had a 20% improvement in their performance speed and a 35% improvement in their performance accuracy. And also, the group that did stay awake, they actually showed improvements in their accuracy after going to sleep the next night. So even after staying awake, then when they went to sleep the next morning, they still showed improvements. And what this shows is your brain will continue to work on and improve your motor skills while you're sleeping, but it will not do this when you're awake. And another cool thing that these sleep researchers found is there were specific transitions where it was particularly difficult for people. So for example, if they had to type the number 4134, sometimes the transition from 4 to 1 could be really difficult for them at first. But after they went to sleep, those specific difficult transitions actually improved a lot. So your brain, somehow when it was sleeping, was able to rewire itself and plan for these different difficult transitions where simply going to sleep made it easier for you to do the next day. So if you've ever tried to learn a new instrument, or you try to learn a new tune or a new beat or a new note, etc., and you find it's a little difficult at first, and then you go to sleep and you wake up the next day and you try practicing it again and you notice that you're able to play it a lot better, this can help explain why. I know this has happened to me before. And again, this is also linked with your NREM sleep. Now, specifically, this is linked with your stage 2 NREM sleep. So if you remember from before, that is not so deep in your sleep stage. It's more on the lighter sleep stage side, but nonetheless is still part of your NREM sleep. Now, specifically, this type of motor learning happens most in the last 2 hours of your sleep. Now, more specifically, that has to do with your sleep spindles. If you remember, I mentioned this before, your sleep spindles are these electrical bursts of activity that occur in your brain. And the more sleep spindles someone has, the more their learning ability is. And you get most of these sleep spindles in the last 2 hours of your sleep. So normally, your last 2 hours of your sleep are dominated by REM sleep. And then in between those long bursts of REM sleep, you have these short bursts of NREM sleep. But those small bursts of NREM sleep have a lot of those sleep spindles. So those last 2 hours are really super important as well, because they have a lot of those sleep spindles, which will improve a lot of your learning. Because again, more sleep spindles means more learning ability and also improved memory. And it doesn't just have to be those last 2 hours of your sleep. Even daytime naps can have a lot of these sleep spindles as well. And daytime naps have been shown to actually improve your motor abilities as well. So one person who practices this is Usain Bolt. Usain Bolt has practiced taking naps a few hours before breaking world records or doing different races, and other athletes have practiced something similar as well. Now, I know I talked a lot about NREM sleep, but I don't want to take anything away from your REM sleep. Your REM sleep is also very important for different reasons. So first of all, like I said, you get most of your sleep spindles in those last 2 hours of going to sleep. And those last 2 hours of sleep are also where you get a majority of your REM sleep. So if you're missing out on that REM sleep and you're missing out on those last 2 hours of sleep, you're also missing out on all those sleep spindles. And also, like your NREM sleep is important for factual information, your REM sleep is important for more general knowledge, because your NREM sleep, like I said, is important for pruning off unnecessary information. So you have all this flooded information in your brain, your NREM sleep selects specifically what is important, and then your REM sleep comes in and it starts making connections, and it starts getting the whole meaning as a whole from all this information. And it's not just general knowledge, your REM sleep is also really important for creativity. So when you're asleep, specifically when you're in REM sleep, your brain is able to make these very unique connections that it would probably not be able to make when you're awake. And this can have major improvements in your problem-solving abilities. And we have heard many stories of people who have had these great inventions or these great discoveries because they had a dream about it. So one example of this is the periodic table of elements. that was discovered by Mendeleev. So Mendeleev claimed that he discovered how to organize this periodic table of elements because he saw it in a dream. He saw how all these elements were arranged perfectly by their weight, by their electronic activity, etc. And when he woke up, he wrote it all down. And he said there were basically only a couple alterations he had to make. Now, I don't know how true that story is. It was recounted by him, but nonetheless, he had a dream about it, and that is how he was able to organize that whole periodic table that we still use today. And it's not just crazy inventions like that. Even singers and songwriters have found that they, in their dreams, are able to come up with a new tune that they would never have thought of when they were awake. So this can be really hard to test because you cannot test someone when they're in REM sleep and ask them to solve some sort of problem or come up with a new musical tune, etc., because they're asleep. But researchers still try to do this. And the way they try to do this is by testing people in the first 90 seconds after they wake up. Because once you wake up, your brain activity doesn't all of a sudden turn to you being awake. You still have a few minutes of where your brain activity is still in that sleep limbo state. And what the researchers thought was if they wake someone up in REM sleep and they test them right away, they forced them to take a test. I'd be pretty annoyed if someone woke me up and they forced me to take a test or solve a problem, etc. But that's exactly what they did in this study, where they tested them in the first 90 seconds after being awake. And they were comparing people both when waking up from NREM sleep and also REM sleep. And there was also a control group of people being awake the whole time. And what researchers did was something called an anagram test. So basically they had all these lists of words and all the words were scrambled. So all the letters were scrambled up and they had to basically unscramble them and find out what the word is. So one example of this is if you wanted to come up with the word cow, if you saw the letters W-O-C, you had to rearrange that to cow, C-O-W. Now they weren't that easy. All the words were 5 letters long. And they wanted to see how many words that these participants could unscramble in those 90 seconds. And what they found is people, when they woke up from NREM sleep, really struggled doing these puzzles. But after waking up from REM sleep, the participants were able to solve a lot more puzzles. So they were able to solve about 15 to 35% more puzzles compared to people that woke up from NREM sleep or were awake the whole time. So what we can take away from this is both your NREM sleep and your REM sleep are super important. While one is more important for factual information, the other one is way more important for creativity and a lot of stuff we still do not know about. We just know that we need to get both of these phases of our sleep. So in a nutshell, it's really important to make sure you make enough time to get those 8 hours of sleep every single night. What drives us to sleep in the first place? How does your body know when it's time to sleep? I'll give you a hint. It has more to do than just whether it's light or dark outside. There are 2 main things that determine whether you are going to be awake or asleep. The first is your body's internal clock, and the second is your body's sleep